Merry Graphmas to you all is part of the Festive Tech Calendar 2021 series. Special thanks to those who made it happen, including Gregor Suddy, Richard Hooper, and many others. Merry Graphmas to you all, exploring public holiday data using Cosmos DB Gremlin API, presenting by yours truly, Saduki. So what is this Graphmas? Well, I celebrate Christmas at this time of year, and I have a love of graph databases that I can't contain and I just have to share with you all. So graph databases plus Christmas equals Graphmas. But what does it really mean? Well, I was looking at the Festive Tech Calendar call for sessions. I was like, wait a minute. Festive Tech Calendar, they're all about Azure. I love my Azure Cosmos DB Gremlin API. There's gotta be some holiday data out there. And sure enough, Azure Open Datasets has a Public Holidays Dataset. So Graphmas is a celebration of December holidays as we explore them using a graph database. Graph database is great for exploring relationships between things, and so we will look at the relationships between countries and their holidays. Now, Azure Open Datasets, be aware that it's more than just a holidays dataset provider. There's data for various topics, including transportation, which includes the AirSim autonomous vehicle data, as well as New York City Tax and Limousine Commission data. There's health and genomics data, which includes COVID-19 and a genomics data lake. The labor and economics open data sets include data around U.S. employment as well as U.S. commodities. Population and safety includes population breakdowns by county and zip code, as well as safety data for select locations including Boston, Chicago, New York City, San Francisco, and Seattle. And the supplemental data sets are for learning machine learning or computer vision, such as diabetes or MNIST for the handwritten digits, Microsoft News recommendations data, as well as the data set we're working with here, which is public holidays. Azure Cosmos DB is a multi-model database. It has a Core SQL API, MongoDB Document Database API, the Cassandra Column Store API, the Table API, which is key values, and then my favorite right now, which is the Gremlin API, which is the graph database implementation. For our demos, we are going to query in the browser with Azure Data Explorer. We may add to a graph with Azure Data Explorer. Just be aware that you can also build graphs with the API libraries. Now, Gremlin is the language that we'll be working with. It comes from the Apache Tinkerpot project. It is procedural, and there's pipeline execution, so you'll read it from left to right. There are various variants out there. So if you're wanting to work with this over an API, rest assured your language may be supported. If it's Java or Groovy, Python, Scala, C#, Ruby, JavaScript, yes, even PHP, and more. Check out the Gremlin driver variants to see if your language is supported for the Gremlin API. Now, getting started with graph databases, there are some key concepts you should know. Vertex is a thing. The edges, those are the arrows between the things. Those are the relationships. They are directional, so pay close attention to where those arrowheads are pointed. The graph is the collection of the vertices and the edges. And then the label is the descriptor to identify the type of vertex or type of edge. You may be wondering, how did the Azure Open Dataset data get into my Cosmos DB Gremlin API? So let's talk about what you need to get before you can follow along. First, you need to have an Azure account. So whether you create one or log into your existing Azure account. Next, you're going to create a Cosmos DB Gremlin API Azure resource. Once you create that specific resource, you will add a database called Graphmas with a collection called Holiday. I have a link here from my starting Jupyter notebook on GitHub, which will go ahead and load the data for you, specifically looking at the countries and the holidays and their relationships. So you'll update the connection details in that Jupyter notebook with your values. Then you'll run the Jupyter Notebook to load the data into your collection. Now for loading the database, the sample Jupyter Notebook is using the Azure ML Open Datasets package from PyPy. I created the notebook using Azure Data Studio on my machine locally. Don't be fooled by its name. Azure Data Studio is a client application. Think of Visual Studio Code plus SQL Server Management Studio come together, and now you have a wonderful UI for working with the data. I may be biased, but I can't rave about Azure Data Studio enough. We use the Gremlin Python package to use Python with the Cosmos DB Gremlin API. In this Jupyter Notebook, we will create vertices for countries and holidays. Countries are deduplicated by their name. That means it's unique names. Holidays, you're going to see some duplication in the names, but they are unique by the combination of name and date. And then we create those edges. We use tos and froms for the relationships. The direction matters, so pay close attention to that. Much like foreign keys in the relational, vertices need to exist before you start adding edges. Just as a sample to see what we're working with, we want to just wipe it out and start from scratch. We add the vertices and edges separately. We are also going to point out the graphs on V2 because V3 isn't supported as of this recording, and we are currently in November of 2021. So what's an easy way to see this graph data while querying it? It's not going to be using your API tools. We will use the Azure Cosmos DB Gremlin API, but we're going to use the Azure Data Explorer to visualize it. And that's just because it does such a good job of visualizing it without having to introduce your libraries for various APIs. You need to make sure that we set the graph style in Azure Data Explorer, because by default, it's IDs. So let's switch over to Azure Data Explorer and see what this looks like. So I am in my Azure Cosmos DB account, specifically in my Gremlin API. Gremlin API appears in the navigation. I have my Graphmas database. If I expand my Graphmas database, you'll see there's my holidays collection. If I expand my holidays collection, I will select graph. And you'll notice to the right, it opens a tab labeled graph with our sample starting query of g.v and the execute gremlin query button. Now, before we get too carried away, I'm going to go ahead and hide our left navigation. So we're just looking at the graph tab. With our g.v, I'm going to go ahead and execute the gremlin query so you can see what this interface looks like. You'll see that we have JSON graph and query stats. Because we're working with a smaller display, I will go ahead and scroll down so you can see there's results, there's a graph, and then there's some data about our node. I'm going to collapse the details on the right, get a peek at our graph, and you'll see that there's IDs. So I'm going to the style. I want to show my vertex, show its name, and show the colors on the nodes based on their label. So I have the countries one color, the holidays another color. Show all neighbors. Let's see sources and targets. Tell it okay. This is taking a look at the vertices and their edges. I am going to go ahead and choose Colombia. I'm going to use the arrows that point outwards to expand our graph. So you can see the graph view. Notice Colombia is in the center. You'll see that there are two different holiday nodes. Colombia selected, and I expand our menu to the right. That's properties. You can see that the ID is used under the covers. This vertex is labeled as country. Its name is Colombia. I'm going to continue to scroll down a bit. You'll see there's no sources, but there are these things called targets. Targets and sources are your edges. Since there are no sources, there's nothing coming into Colombia, but all the relationships are going out from Colombia. Those are the targets. The edge is labeled as celebrates. So Colombia celebrates La Inmaculada Concepcion, and Colombia celebrates Navidad. Now, if we take it from a holiday perspective, so let me collapse this properties pane so you can see the full graph again. Let's say we're going to look at Navidad. And this is very intentional because Navidad, I know, is celebrated by at least two other countries. So on the Navidad node, there's three dots that appear below it. I clicked on those three dots. So now I'm looking at Navidad. And the three countries that celebrate Navidad Christmas Day are Argentina, Colombia, and Mexico. And if I expand properties, you can see Navidad Christmas. That is its name. The holiday date is December 25th, 2021. There are no targets, so there are no relationships starting at the holiday and going out. Instead, you have the relationships coming into the holiday. Colombia, Argentina, and Mexico are listed as sources. They're coming in, they're sources. If they're going out, they're targets. Now let's take a look at our vertexes and the syntax. G that you see in the Gremlin syntax, that represents the graph. If you want to get all vertexes or all vertices, you see g.v. G.v.has label, we can say I only want vertices of a particular label, in this case labeled as country. Because we want to look at Colombia in particular, we did g.v.has named Colombia. Now since we're working on a smaller screen, I wanted to capture the JSON in a slide so you can see that there's not just a graph representation, but the JSON representation, which is what you'll get back in the API call. The JSON includes the IDs used by the system under the covers, the label, the type for the vertex, or the type for the edge, and a collection of properties. Our countries only have one property, which is name. Holidays have the holiday date as well. Now in edge, this is the relationship. Again, these are the sources or the targets. It does have two targets, La Inmaculada Concepcion, the Immaculate Conception, and Navidad, Christmas. In the box for Colombia under targets that the edge label says celebrates, So you can read this as Colombia celebrates La Inmaculada Concepcion and Colombia celebrates Navidad. To get the edges, you start with the graph, G. If you want all edges, you can do G.E. And then typically you'll filter off of there. Perhaps you want to see the ones that are just labeled celebrates, so you can do G.E. that has labeled celebrates. But if we look at the holiday like Navidad, you can see Argentina, Mexico, and Colombia all celebrate Navidad. So you can see that there's these edges, these vertexes, but let's put them together. How do we write Gremlin queries and navigate the graph? Well, Gremlin is written and read from left to right. See it as a pipeline. Always starts with G. Then you have to think, do you want a collection of the vertices or the collection of the edges? So G.V for vertices or E for edges. You can use your filtering with your has and then a property name and a property value. You could do has label. But then once you're ready to traverse the relationships or the edges, you need to think about, are they going in, are they going out, or are they both? You want the ins and the outs. So in this particular example, we want to get all edges for the Colombia vertex. It'd be G.V, so starting with the collection of vertices, we want the Colombia vertex, so we want to filter it. It has the property of name with the value of Colombia. We want all edges, which means we want both. Now, because we want edges, we'll be specific and say .both E. The results will show you JSON. You won't see the graph image, but I've left the graph image here so that you at least have the visual of what you're looking at. There are two of them. There's one that goes from Colombia to the Immaculate Conception and one to Christmas Day. Both of those, they start coming out of the country, going into the holiday. The in-V label and the in-V, where's the relationship going in? The out-V label and the out-V, where is it coming out of? So let's talk about ins and outs because it gets confusing at first. So if we look at Colombia, it will have out E because there are edges heading out of it. Those arrows are pointing at the holidays. Notice that arrow direction makes a difference. If we were to check Colombia's in E, you'll notice that there's 0 edges because there's no arrows pointing at Colombia. Now if we were to change that at Navidad, it will have in E because those edges are headed into it. So that's from the vertex side. Now the edge side, the in-V and in-V label go together, and the out-V and the out-V label go together. The in-V label and the in-V, that's where is this edge going into? The out-V and the out-V label, where is this edge coming from? Now, suppose you want to know more about this data. Public Holidays Dataset, we're looking at December, but what does that mean? How do we know what all is in here? Starting with, how do we know the labels? Well, you can always do a G.V or .E, because edges and vertices both have labels. You can call .label, open and close parentheses, that is specifically .label singular. Many, many times I will find myself do .labels and then cringe when I see the error message. It is .label singular, and then use .dedupe to deduplicate, to make unique values for our labels. Unique labels for vertices, G.V, .label, .dedupe, return country and holiday. Unique labels for edges are G.E, .label, .dedupe, celebrates. Now suppose we wanted to define the unique countries. We could say G.V, .has label country, .values, .dedupe, and it'll get us the values for the country nodes, and their unique values. So Portugal, Norway, Spain, Argentina, and so on. But it is unique. If we want to add a vertex, we can do it via Gremlin. However, the Azure Data Explorer allows us to add a vertex using their UI. To add a vertex using Gremlin, it's g.addv, specify the label in your addv call. And then you may chain various property calls to set the property with its property name and property value. For adding an edge, you need to think about where are you starting from and where are you going to. So suppose that we have Boxing Day as a vertex that is celebrated by many countries, but we know it originated in the United Kingdom. Let's go ahead and add this edge. So we're going to get the Boxing Day vertex and then add the edge labeled originated and going to the United Kingdom vertex. The relationship arrows matter. So let's switch back to our Azure Data Explorer. Okay, I'm going to shrink our graph. We want the one that has Boxing Day, so just so you can see what that looks like. So it has a property of Boxing Day. I'm going to go ahead and execute the Gremlin query so you can see as I scroll down. Oh, there's Boxing Day, all right. December 26th, December 27th, and December 28th. Various countries celebrate Boxing Day on different days. Now we're going to say that it originated in the United Kingdom. So we need to add E. We need to give our edge a label. So I'm going to say it originated in. And where is it going? Is it going from or to? So from Boxing Day to, and we want the United Kingdom. So g.v.has name United Kingdom. And we're going to click execute Gremlin query. So that's how you add an edge. We have new vertex here, but there is no new edge. So that you have to do in Gremlin. All right, for another example, we want to take a look at what are the holidays that are celebrated in Colombia. So the holidays that are celebrated in Colombia. Well, first let's start with Colombia. So I'm going to collapse our graph. How do we get to Colombia? We do g.v. We know it's a vertex. Dot has the name property with the value of Colombia. We want the holidays that it celebrates. Well, first we need to go out of here. We want to follow celebrates specifically. We want the in vertex for that. So where's that relationship going into? It's going into those holidays. And we want to see their names. So we're going to get the values and we're going to pass in the name property. So values, pass in the property name of the values you're trying to get. Execute Gremlin query. Colombia celebrates 2 holidays. La Inmaculada Concepción and Navidad. Okay. But what about grouping and ordering? You may be coming into this with that SQL mind and you can't help think of the relational stuff. Can you do some of the relational stuff in graph databases? It's about the relationships, but yes, you can do relational queries if you need to. It's not its forte, so be cautious in what you do. For grouping and aggregating, the example I like to use for aggregating is count. There are 37 countries, so what I did is I did the get me all the vertices with the label of country. I called .count, and that gave me 37 as its result. The other example I'm using for aggregation is the number of holidays by date. So first I needed to get the holidays, so that's g.v. has label holiday. Then I want to group them by their holiday date. And then I want to count all of the names for each date. So then I do another .by the values of the name property and call count on that. So the first by off of the group is what field or what property I'm grouping by. And then finally I have the aggregation after that. Pay close attention with group. Make sure that you use parentheses after group followed by a dot and then by with its expression. It is not group by together. It is not group underscore by. Group is its own call followed by. Ordering, same kind of deal where order is its own followed by. It is not order by or order underscore by or order dash by. It is order parentheses dot by parentheses field. Say I wanted to order it by name. Do order by name. And then finally I'm using .values.name to select just the values of name. I don't need the whole objects. With ordering, you can also do filtering and limiting. So say you only want the first 5 records, you could do .limit and the number of what you want to limit on. If you want to order by date, you can order by date as well. So filtering and ordering, we did holidays, order by date, the name. This is g.v has label holiday order by holiday date by name. So notice there's 2 buys, order it by the first property and then ordered by the second property. Suppose we want to filter for just the December 25th holidays, as there are quite a few. We want to order those within name. We get the vertices, filter it down first, and then call the order. So we did a has label holiday to focus specifically on the holidays. Then say only the ones that have the holiday date property set to December 25th, 2021. Then we ordered it by the name property. Can it tell me how I got there? Yeah, Gremlin has ways of helping you out. So let's talk about Colombia and Mexico. They share the holiday Navidad. So we can walk the path. So I'm going to bring up my laser pointer friend. And we're going to start with Colombia. So g.v has name Colombia. We're going to go out east, so we're going to follow this. This follows all the edges coming outside of Colombia. Then in V. And then we want all of its edges that are coming in. So this one coming in, this relationship coming in, and this relationship coming in. There are 3 arrows pointed at Navidad. They're coming from Argentina, Mexico, and Colombia. Now we need to go out V to the vertices, the actual nodes. And that's how we got there. we could run this query in our Azure Data Explorer, and it'll return the path of the way it stepped through. We can also look at execution profiles of these queries. So say that I was running g.v, that has name Colombia, out e, in v, in e, out v, has name Mexico. If I call .execution profile off of that, it gives me a JSON with a healthy amount of information related to storage details, times, and counts. This particular output you can see in the JSON. There's the query. The Gremlin query is just called Gremlin. It has an activity ID. You can see its total time, total resource usage, and then the metrics themselves include things showing the calls, for example, get vertices, get edges, get neighbor vertices, get edges, get neighbor vertices, filter and batch operator, and then finally the project operator. So that's what the execution profiling metrics helps. So this sounds so cool. Graph databases, now you see why I'm so excited, because relationships and tracking and seeing how they work and being able to follow those paths, kind of like Hansel and Gretel and breadcrumbs, that's what I usually refer to. How do you get started with this? How do you learn more? Azure Cosmos DB has some cheat sheets that will help you with the syntax for all their different APIs, including Gremlin API. There's a Azure Cosmos DB Gremlin Graph Support and Compatibility with Tinkerpop Features article. You need to pay close attention to that, because if you're looking at Gremlin tutorials and find that syntax isn't working, it may not be supported yet. Practical Gremlin and Apache Tinkerpop tutorial by Kelvin Lawrence. Great introduction on getting started with Gremlin. And the Gremlin cheat sheet by Daniel Cuppets. Every time I'm working with Gremlin, I'm like, how do I do that? Where's that cheat sheet again? His is the one I pull out. So these are just a few of the many resources out there. So we were able to see what kind of holidays are out there and what countries celebrate them. Feel free to use this as a starting spot to see what other relationships are there in this data set. Perhaps you'll find other uses for graph databases. There are many ways to see what kind of relationships there are there. There are many ways to evaluate relationships looking at it through a graph database. Merry Graphmas to you all. Wishing you a festive holiday season. To learn more about other Azure resources that are out there, stay tuned to festivetechcalendar.com. Feel free to reach out to me. I am Saduki at Saduki on Twitter. Or connect with me on LinkedIn at linkedin.com/insaduki. Happy holidays.